You are now dialed into Investment Research Radio. All material on this program is not to be taken as investment advice and is for informational purposes only. Investment Research Radio interviews the most exciting up-and-coming companies, as well as market commentary from leading analysts and traders. Now with your host, Ray Crowley.
Welcome to Investment Research Radio. I'm your host, Ray Crowley. Today we have Ross Orr, President and CEO of BacTech Environmental, which is BAC on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Thanks for coming on, Ross.
My pleasure.
So just tell us about BacTech Environmental. I guess you guys do some pretty interesting things in respect to new ways to retrieve metals and to do remediation as well.
Yeah, I would say that our primary technology is bioleaching, which is the use of bacteria to break down sulphide minerals to release the metals for recovery. The sulphides, when they're in tailings, will break down on their own over time, and they produce sulfuric acid. And of course, that's what they refer to as acid rock drainage. And that material, or that liquid, will leave the tailings and take with it anything that's soluble in acid, like arsenic or copper or nickel, etc. That's our primary technology. But of course, we'll adapt to every situation and try to apply the technology that we think is most appropriate at the time.
So those toxins, would one danger of those toxins be like acid rain?
No, more acid generated that flows into the rivers. And what it does is it changes the pH of the water. And so if it becomes very acidic, you tend to have sort of very, very high growths of algae and things like that. And it removes the oxygen out of the water, and then the fish starve. So it basically changes the pH of the water to a more acidic environment, which is not good.
So what are some of the key projects that you're currently engaged in?
Well, the principal project that we have on the go right now is actually in Bolivia, and oddly enough, it's not a bioleaching candidate. It's a very simple. It'll be an acid wash at the beginning to recover the copper that's already oxidized in the tailings, and then it'll be followed by some flotation, where we try to separate the sulfides from the tailings, and then that particular material will go through a brine leach process to produce a copper-silver product, I guess, for lack of a better word, and tin. And the tin will be the last thing that we try to recover out of the process.
So there's a variety of metals that you can target. And what would be the is there a choice metal that you look for, or?
Well, I think predominantly gold.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to produce gold. I think that the most important thing that we have to make your listeners understand is that we're not a mining company. We're an environmental company that happens to recover metal as a result of our process. As I said in my year-end note to my shareholders, you can pay me in bananas as long as I can convert the bananas into cash. And of course, any metals we recover will be sold for cash as well, and that's how we get our payment.
So that's sort of your business model, I guess, is to go and work on these sites. They're typically tailings from historical mines.
Yeah, and they tend to be in the hands of the government because the mining company has disappeared in the night or gone bankrupt, and so the government ends up holding the bag, so to speak, for the cleanup, and the people, they want it cleaned up. So when you approach a government and you say, look, we want access to these tailings, their first question is, well, how much is it going to cost us? And we say, well, nothing. We'll do the test work to determine whether it's a bona fide project or not. And if it is, all we want is the metal. And in the case of Bolivia, although it's a very small, only 500,000 tons of tailings, it runs 1.7 copper, 1.3 tin, and over 8 ounces of silver per ton. So, it's got mine grade metals in it, but it also generates a lot of acid, and that's the primary reason we're there, is to eliminate the acid generating sulfides And fortunately for us, we get paid metal, and in this case, it's fairly good.
And you also have a project in Ecuador, I understand. From what I've been hearing, Ecuador has been opening up their doors to be quite mining friendly the last little while, in the last few years.
Yeah, they were actually, I guess, voted the place to be at PDAC last year here in Toronto in March. This year in March. Yeah, they've gone through a left-wing renaissance where they were very close with Bolivia and Venezuela. Most everybody knows what happens to Venezuela. Ecuador is now trying to sort of go back to the world and say, look, we need your money, we need your development, and so we're going to be a lot more or a lot less stringent, I guess it is, for mining projects. And there's been a couple of big ones. I mean, Lundin Mining has the Fruta del Norte deposit that's being developed. And then there's something called Cascabel, which was discovered last year that is turning into be a massive open pit deposit that's very high grade and copper gold equivalency of 1%. But there's already, I think, 8 or 10 million ounces. I mean, don't quote me on that, but it's shaping up to be a very, very large deposit. But again, that's not something that we get involved in. We get involved in the stuff that's already been done, and especially in places like Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, where you have these artisanal miners or small miners. Historically, what they've done is they crawl into a hole, and the claustrophobia is just amazing. I couldn't do it, but they go into these holes and they mine quartz veins, and they bring the material to surface, and then they try to use mercury as an amalgamator, because gold and silver tend to cling onto mercury. And it's horrible to say, but a lot of these people are dead by the time they're 40, and if not, their central nervous system is severely damaged by the mercury. So
Wow.
There was a conference in Japan a number of years ago called the Minamata Conference, and all the countries came to a decree that they have to stop these people from using mercury as an amalgamator. So where we come in is the bioleaching technology produces a stable form of arsenic that is huge for the mining industry. Like an example, if you have a gold deposit and you mine arsenopyrite, which is an arsenic sulphide, and then you produce an arsenopyrite concentrate and you want to sell that to a smelter or to a roaster, they are handcuffed because the smelter can only burn so much arsenic a year. And so they say, look, we'll take your material, but we're only going to pay you, 40 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, because they have to blend that material in with cleaner material over time. So it's a lot more cumbersome for them. So we step in and say, look, bring us the arsenopyrite. We'll put it through the bioleach process, and we'll produce a ferric arsenate at the back end. That's a U.S. EPA landfillable material. I mean, not that we would ever do that, of course, but we put it back into a proper tailings facility.
So one of your slogans is "Our bugs eat rocks."
Yeah.
Could you tell us about how it's more of a natural process that you have there?
Yeah, these bacteria are doing this anyways in nature, and we like to say that what takes them 20 years to do in nature, we get them to do it in 5 or 6 days by giving them the Garden of Eden to live in. See, in nature, they might work 4 or 5 days a year when the conditions are optimal. Usually in the summer months or warmer weather, sunshine after some rain, etc. That's what it wakes them up, so to speak, and they go to work, start breaking down sulphides, and that's how they get their energy. If you go through mountains, a lot of times you'll see brown staining where water is dripping off the side of a hill. That's basically acid that's being released with copper in it. And so all we've done is take what they do and speed them up by giving them that 4 or 5 days of optimal conditions. We give it to them for 24 hours a day. So they live about 8 days. They split, feverishly, much like in the making of beer. Sort of. It's like a giant wastewater treatment plant. Actually, is what it is.
That's amazing. I think the mining industry seems seems like the world and the mining industry has been waiting a long time to see something like this come around. But yeah, could you just cover a bit on the story in Ecuador?
Sure. So Ecuador, I was down, I guess it was last January, and I met with the Minister of the Environment at the time, and we learned about an area called Ponce Enriquez, which is down in the southern part of the country, in an area where arsenopyrite is the prevalent metal, or sorry, the prevalent sulphide, that is gold bearing and copper. These mines tend to be about 1,000 meters above the coastal plain, and there are a lot of them. I mean, there's big ones, there's small ones, but these are operations that they actually are underground mining, and they're crushing it, and they're using flotation, and they're producing tailings, and they're also producing a concentrate they sell off to the Chinese. Unfortunately, again, at 40 to 50 cents on the dollar because of the arsenic. The government told us in our first meeting, they said, look, those tailings that are at this 1,000-meter level are full, and they're built literally on terraces on the side of the Andes. And it's going to be a very, very ugly situation if you ever have a 100-year storm or an earthquake or something, because these things will just let go and work their way down the side of the mountain. So she said, we have to find a solution, or we're going to have to stop these people from mining. And it's a very pro-mining area. I mean, there are actually parts of the world that do like mining. And this one provides a very good living for the people of the local community. So we said, well, the obvious thing for us to do would be to build a bioleach plant down on the coastal plain. And then that way you're trucking tailings downhill, which is great. It's, less expensive. And we'll process it and open up space so they can continue to mine. And that's sort of the basis of what we're doing. Now, keeping in mind that we're always aware of the fact that those people that are actually producing, hopefully, will look at us and say, you know what? If you can pay us more than the Chinese are paying us, we'll deliver our material to you. And because our technology operates in tanks, large stainless tanks, if you want to double the capacity, you double the number of tanks, or triple or quadruple, or whatever you want to do. So we'll probably start at 40 tons a day. A plant would probably run 10 to 12 million US with a 1-year payback. And these are all sort of back of the napkin calculations.
So you're looking at
we know it costs $250 a ton to process arsenopyrite. So whatever we buy it for, and what we end up selling it for, less the $250 will give us our profit margin.
That's great. So you're looking at potential revenue streams?
Hopefully in Bolivia later this year. Again, that's not bioleaching. It's just it's an off-the-shelf technology, and realistically, because the project is only about 5 years, 100,000 tons of tailings being processed a year, we'll probably buy a Chinese plant because I don't need a Cadillac for 5 years. If I was going to be there for 25 years, I'd probably have to buy a Western plant, but I'm also going to pay probably 4 times the cost of what I would for a Chinese plant. We expect the total capex in Bolivia to be $7 or $8 million US, which is nothing. The cash flow off this thing is going to be sort of in the $8 to $10 million US a year. So again, it's a 1-year payback. Our partner there, incidentally, is the government. It's Comibol, which is the state mining company. And effectively, the deal we have is we put up the capital and build the plant. We get 100% of the cash flow for 18 months or payback of the capital, whichever comes first. And then it goes 55-45 in their favor. That's Bolivian mining law. We can't get around that. But, people say that's a ripoff. I say, well, listen, it's their railway that's there. It's their power plant. It's their mill. We're going to be building new tailings on their land. It's a pretty nice deal for us, actually.
And as far as tailings piles go, I guess would there be like a testing process involved with multiple tailings? I'm sure there's a vast selection around the world of different types of tailings. Could you explain a bit on the testing process?
Yeah, and I would say that's probably where our biggest challenge is that because we're such a small company with a small market cap, we have to raise that money to do the test work to convince ourselves and to convince a banker that the plant or that the project is viable. So in the case of the Bolivian project, 50% of the value in those tailings are tin. People don't realize that tin is over $19,000 a ton. And when you compare that to copper, which is about 6,000, you can see, there's good value there. The problem is that we can't recover a lot of it, and that's unfortunate. We're only getting about 25% of the material into a concentrate that only grades about 6%. The reason I'm telling you this is because we did test work in Bolivia at the university, and we got lousy tin results. So we decided that we would try, call it Western technology, and we engaged Metsolve out of Vancouver, your hometown, to do the test work. And as it turned out, they didn't do much better, unfortunately. The tin's very fine grained, so it doesn't float very well, and it's not heavy enough to be captured through gravity. So it's unfortunate we're not going to be getting a lot of value out of that. The real value in that project is in the copper and the silver.
Okay.
So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, we have to do test work. Now in Ecuador, what we did, after we learned from the minister about the problems there, we went out and actually had a third party go out and get us some concentrate, some ore, like raw ore, as well as some tailings. And we have a relationship with Laurentian University in Sudbury, where we set up a small desktop bioleach facility, and we did test work on all that material. And on average, we got all the arsenic. I mean, we got 99+% of the arsenic tied up, and about 85% of the gold. We're now in phase 2, where we're going to focus more on the gold recovery, and that's by changing the different pulp densities that go into the tanks. So we're quite comfortable that the technology is going to be a big help in the arsenic fight in Ecuador. I mean, some of these concentrates run 15% arsenic. The World Health Organization says to a smelter, you can only burn 1% arsenic, and you're only allowed to burn so many tons a year. So it's a problem. In Ecuador, these small miners, these artisanal miners, they avoid it because they know they're not going to get paid a lot for it. So our goal is going to be, look, guys, go get it, and we'll pay you for it. So that's sort of the rationale there.
So could you give us a bit of a blue sky picture of, I guess, what BacTech could be in the next, 3 to 5 years with all the different variations of tailings and places around the world?
Well, I would say that there's enough to keep us busy in the north-south, like the southern hemisphere. It's just easier dealing in time zones where you live.
Yeah.
Would we license the technology to somebody for Africa? Yeah, we probably would. But the reality is that, and I just had this conversation yesterday with a fellow from Peru. I said, look, the first plant is the most important plant because that's your cash flow, that's your proof of concept. That cash flow will pay for a lot of the test work that has to be done. And I call it the domino effect. I mean, it's, you'll build Ecuador, and then you'll probably go to northern Peru to Piura, where again, there's a lot of arsenopyrite there, then Colombia, and then Central America. So let's say you build one a year for the next 5 years. You're probably producing, I'm going to say, somewhere between 100 and 150,000 ounces a year, plus copper. We produce a copper cement or a copper sulfate as a byproduct. So, with operating costs, where your margins are probably going to be, 30, 35%. I mean, pretty
much less than building a whole full-scale mine.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And you know what? We'll probably market it as green gold. We know there's a refinery in Italy that buys gold and brands it as green gold and sells it off to jewelers and whatnot.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Would it even? I guess it might command a premium then, perhaps. I guess it's sort of a new probably a newer sort of market.
Well, yeah, I think for them it's for the jeweler it's great because they can target people that are concerned about things like wearing jewelry that comes from mining. Well, I'm saying no, this is coming from remining, so to speak. Like I always say to people always say, well, what about permits? I say, well, who argues with somebody who wants to clean something up? Nobody does. You'd be an idiot if you said, I don't want this cleaned up because it's going to do this or that. I mean, it doesn't happen.
Is there a possibility of going into even places in United States and Canada that has not been mining friendly, where this technology could potentially help reintroduce mining or green mining into that land or that property?
That's a good question. I mean, most of the tailings, the historic tailings in Canada and the U.S. have been picked over pretty good. Excuse me. There's not a lot of upside to apply our business model to it, which is why we're in South America, because I hate to say it, we left a hell of a mess there over the years, and because their recovery methods were not very good, the tailings tend to be relatively rich in metal. So until somebody brings me something that is like, let's say, a big mine that's coming to an end, it's been producing for 100 years. If we can get to them before they decide to put a big giant cap on it of clay and cross their fingers that nothing happens over the next 100 years, we want to get to them and say, look, you can extend the jobs for people, because when a mine dies, cities die or towns die with them. I mean, there's just no reason to be there anymore. So if you can say to 25% of the workforce, look, come with us and work on reprocessing these tailings, you'll be there another 20 years, And there's situations out there like that we're watching closely.
Definitely a lot of win-win scenarios that are potential out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I sit here and we've talked and you say this is, very, very interesting and, its time has come, but we just can't seem to tap into that investor base out there of I don't know whether they're millennials or what they are, but
well, yeah, I think that a lot of the younger generation is just so focused on technology, but there is a lot of people that are interested in green investing, and I think that's one of the challenges that that you have, is how to engage that investor base, because I guess this story is a lot more, probably more appealing to millennials than it is to people who are necessarily boomers or getting close to retirement.
Well, the reality is, if you just look around your room where you're sitting right now, how many metal things do you see in the room? Like there's tons of them, right?
Well, yeah.
So we have to mine. I mean, if we want to live our lifestyle, whether it's mining for lithium, even for batteries, copper is a huge metal used in all sorts of manufacturing and industries. It's going to happen. It's not, you're not going to stop metal mining. So let's try to do it nicer and cleaner. And meanwhile, I'll let the big guys worry about that technology, how they're going to do it. I'm just coming in behind and saying, I'm going to pick up the mess that you left behind.
I know there's a lot of nightmare stories over in China that I've heard. There's just been mining operations that have been so haphazardly put together, and a lot of toxins. And I know your market's not necessarily focused in Asia, but I'm thinking there's got to be a lot of potential business over there for you to license out to, like you were saying, because I hear that China is cracking down on these stepping up regulations, and this could be a solution for a lot of Chinese error in the past.
Well, believe it or not, we built a plant in China in 2001, and then we doubled the capacity of it in 2008. But that was a licensing deal, and there's no money in that for us. All the money goes to them. Mm-hmm. We got paid a couple $1 million in a small royalty for 5 years. But that plant's capable of processing 200 tons of concentrate a day. And it was taking in material from as far away as Greece, believe it or not, because again, people are running around with these arsenic sulphides that they're producing, and they're trying to find the best price they can get, and they'll travel halfway around the world to do it. I have nothing against China. I just don't have to go there right now. I mean, there's enough stuff in Peru and Ecuador and, in the sort of the northern part of South America to keep me busy for a long time. I'm 61. Now, I will work till I'm 80 because I can't think of anything else to do. But, there's a lot of work to be done there. I mean, honestly, if we do this right, this could grow into a sizable company. It's not going to happen overnight. Again, you got to get that first one done, right? Sort of like, show me I'm from Missouri or whatever the expression is,
Definitely. And so as far as right at the end of this year and 2019 is upon us, what are some key catalysts that you could see coming forward that you'd like to see for BacTech?
Well, the project in Bolivia, which is actually an old mill. All right, there's no actual mine there. The material came from 3 or 4 different mines over the last 80 years, which is why you get this mix mash of, there might even be tungsten in there for all we know. All we're doing is ripping the guts out of an old mill, and we're going to put a new acid wash, gravity flotation, and a brine leach circuit. Doesn't take long to put that together. What we're doing right now is just starting the feasibility study so that we can bank finance it or fund to finance it. But again, Bolivia is a tough place to do business. They haven't been that nice to people over the years, and people remember that. So it's not one of your prime, grade A investment countries, although it has probably one of the better economies in South America because of their oil and gas exposure. So, to make a long story short, would love to have that in production this year, in the second half of this year. All right, that's one. The Bioleach situation, which will be Ecuador. As a matter of fact, I'm going down on the 5th of January for a week and with our Ecuadorian partner. By the way, we always try to take a local partner with us wherever we go, because you want somebody who understands the rules and regulations, the culture, everything else. And so we've hooked up with a group called Green Oil, which is an environmental company in the oil and gas and mining space. And we're going out to this area of Ponce Enriquez to talk to these larger tailings facilities that are there. And with that, we're going to try and tie up 4 or 5 million tons. And then you're off to the races. I mean, we've done the test work. We'll do some more probably just to make sure. But at the end of the day, we're ready to go. So, you could have in the next 18 months, you could have two plants up and running, generating cash flow and revenues and earnings.
Yeah, I hope to see that. It'd be really exciting.
Me too.
I think this is definitely a needed technology in the world. It's a great story. It's something that a lot of people, I think, really want to see come to fruition.
Yeah, and believe me, there's a lot of work down there. You go into the areas like in Portobello in southern Ecuador, which was an area that really was started by these artisanal miners, these people that crawl into these holes and use mercury and everything. And there's a big fight between, a disagreement between Ecuador and Peru, because the rivers flow south into Peru, where they grow a lot of asparagus and things like that. And they're not very happy about having mercury and arsenic coming down the river, because you can well imagine. So, I met with the current minister of mines, and I guess you call the Minister of Natural Resources, who was a fellow who spent many years at Halliburton in Ecuador and retired. And the new president, Moreno, brought him out of retirement to try and add some horsepower to getting back into the game again for Ecuador. He just looked at me and said, "Look, this is fantastic. I'm going to give you a letter." So I'm hoping to get that letter when I go down in January that says, we stand behind you. They don't have any money. I mean, none of the governments have any money anymore for this stuff. So if somebody comes along and says, I'll do it for nothing, how can you say no?
Yeah, that's definitely attractive. Any last comments that you'd like to make before we tie it up here?
No, just any of your listeners, if they want to phone and talk to me, I'm happy to do it. I like doing that. I tend to be a little more folksy than most president CEO types. You'll see my year-end letter that comes out in early January. What I've done is I've taken last year's letter and I've written paragraphs below as to what actually happened, like where I made predictions or I made goals. I said, okay, we missed this one. This one we did this and we did that well. Just kind of thing.
Just kind of like a simple, clear communication.
Yeah, you know what? No BS is what it is. I get a lot of people phoning me and saying it's refreshing to actually read something that isn't just a standard,
CDR filing.
Yeah, exactly. So what I've started doing is I started writing a blog under the news section on our website where you put out a press release that the average investor looks at it and his eyes gloss over because he has no idea what you're talking about. So I write a one-pager on the blog and I say, this is what the press release said, right? Just putting it in layman's terms.
What's your website?
It's bactechgreen.com. And it's BAC, which is for bacteria, obviously, and TECH for technology. Green.com.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on here. And we'll talk again. We'll keep in touch.
Great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning into Investment Research Radio. Don't forget to sign up for the regular show and stay informed at investmentresearchradio.com.